Hello, I'm Henry Mack, and welcome to a special college edition of Viewpoint. We've thrown out the set and the script, turning our attention to the largest generation since the baby boomers, millennials, the generation that came to age at the end of the 20th century. They are often given a bad rap, accused of being entitled and self-centered, among other things. And so we reached out to some college students to talk about these stereotypes and a lot more, in a conversation that just might change the way you see this generation. And so joining me now for a frank and honest discussion on religion, ethics, and social issues, we welcome our student panel. Let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Jose. I'm a college junior at Florida International University, and I'm studying international relations.
Hi, I'm Avi Zemel. I'm a student at University of Miami. I'm double majoring in poli-sci and religious studies.
Hi, my name is Sylne, and I'm a Miami-Dade College student, and I'm a biology major.
Hello, my name is Constance Thurmond. I just finished graduating from Miami-Dade College where I studied philosophy.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Dorcinvil. I'm a recent graduate from Miami-Dade College and I'm studying social work.
Hello, I'm Matthew Hogue-Smith. I'm a graduate student at Barry University and I am studying practical theology.
Hi, I'm Sara Haroon. I go to Florida International University and I am a bio major.
Hello, I'm Alicia Santana. I go to the University of Miami studying religious studies.
So exciting to sort of have you here and explore topics that are really pressing, especially in today's political climate regarding the election. But let's start with what I alluded to at the outset, namely those negative characteristics associated with your generation. Coddled, entitled, victimized, easily offended, right? And one big one is being irreligious, non-religious. What do you think about those stereotypes? Are they true?
I think some of them are true. I actually have a little bit of a funny story. When I was working at a particular high school in Texas, I got approached by a parent because I gave their kid homework. And they thought it was disrespectful to give their kids homework and that they needed time just to breathe and sleep in like a study hall kind of sense. But I was teaching fundamentals of music, so I thought it was kind of important to give out homework.
Interesting. Other thoughts about that? What the homework implied too much pressure?
Yeah,
right?
It was just because the teacher that was there before me treated it like a study hall.
So you generally agree with the stereotypes?
Yeah, to a point, yeah.
Other thoughts?
I feel like it's more how they're judging us based off the old generation. They're using those standards to view us. So to them, we seem lazy and narcissistic, as you said, but it's a different standard. How we're growing up is so different than the last generation. It's hard to use the same standards to judge us as that. So I think that could be it.
Yeah, it's interesting that we even separate generations out into distinct and rigid categories. And it sort of makes everyone sort of hard to relate to you. Employers are finding it difficult, politicians are finding it difficult, and we do it, I don't know why we do it, but whether or not it's true is just an interesting thing to explore. What are your thoughts?
I don't necessarily agree with the laziness thing. I think I agree with what the last speaker said, that it just, in relation to the previous generation, I think we have different objectives. And I think language is something really important to our generation, and words that we choose and communicating with each other and making sure that we are accepting of the other individual. I think we're moving more to respecting the individual as their own unique person, and making sure that they have that identity as opposed to putting them into this greater scheme of like a box, I guess, how we talk about categorization.
Really interesting point, I think, the respect of the individual identity of everyone is, I think we can all agree, an inherent good, but I wonder if that leads to a culture of political correctness, right, which also characterizes your generation as being victimized or too easily offended. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, as a student on a college campus, it's not hard to see how this whole stereotype can affect students in the sense that microaggressions and their safe spaces, and it really hinders discussion on important issues that otherwise would have been had.
What's a microaggression?
It's a term that offends somebody else.
Yeah, a statement or a phrase or a word that doesn't seem overtly offensive, but it could be passively really deeply offensive to someone. And the argument is that we've sort of become too sensitized, really.
Well, I think that honestly, like, our generation is trying to find this balance because, or not so much a balance, but more so we're leaning toward one side of the scale. Specifically what I mean by that is I could say, the generation before us, let's say they weren't as aware. It's not that they weren't aware, they just didn't pay as much importance to, political correctness and all this. And it's not to say that they were wrong in doing so. Now our generation is trying to find, I believe, how do we become this, where do we find this political correctness? What does that mean to us? And in doing so, maybe we're going too far. So I think that throughout our lives, we're going to find hopefully a middle ground. That's what I hope that we achieve as a generation. How are we conscious of the terminology we're using and how it's affecting people without being too overly conscious about it? And another thing that I think that's important about our generation, or you were saying, like, you know, what do we think about these stereotypes? It's really hard to examine the stereotypes when you're in them, per se. So what I think that is a challenge as an individual who's a part of this generation is, how do I examine myself from outside? And I can't say personally that I've achieved that or that we've achieved that. It's really hard to say, well, you're selfish. Well, to me, I don't seem selfish, but does that make me selfish by saying that? You know, so it's just kind of this interesting and weird balance that we're trying to find.
Yeah. Last point on the stereotype.
Yeah, to kind of go off of what you're saying, I think that our generation has also been affected by such a boom in social media and our access to the internet. Something that I've discussed in the past with my mentors and supervisors is the fact that we're a click away. So our information, our resumes, the way we behave on social media, that's all accessible to employers, to professionals. So we are constantly aware of who we are as people and constantly trying to stick out, you know, and identify ourselves as individuals, because we're kind of trying to single ourselves out and be distinguished when getting hired, when getting into, you know, like universities and such. So that definitely affects us as people.
Interesting, interesting.
If I may,
go for
before
it,
we move on, and I think it's a good point, you know, bringing in the relativity and the ease that we have to communicate with each other. And I think that our generation, what's unique about us is that we realize that we're different, you know, from the rest of the world, and we're not like just stuck in this in box within our own community. You know, that there's people on the other side of the world who practice different religions from us, who look like us, who don't look like us, and I think we all starting to put that into perspective more. And I think that's what our language is really different and unique about us. And I think that's a good thing, because for us it's about coexistence. Yeah.
Speaking about coexistence, one of the difficult topics to talk about is religion and how religions can coexist, especially in this environment of what we're in, right? And we have a graphic, I think, from the Pew Center breaking down the percentage of believers and non-believers as it varies from generation to generation. And what's clear is that Americans in general are becoming much more irreligious or non-religious, right? Not necessarily atheistic, but agnostic about the whole thing. But your generation, above all generations, clearly is not a fan of church. I want to explore that a bit.
If I may?
Sure.
What I've observed most, especially around my church and kids that I know and other children, is that they think that religion is too much of a structure. So, and they do not want to go according to the rules, and we are known as rebels. So we do not want to follow the old rules that were there. And then some of us find that church is kind of boring, depending on where you go and what they do in there. So I think it's mostly making it more interesting and more adherent to what they think is like much more fun and that they can relate to. Because most of the time, I experience it sometimes in my church, is that church is mostly seen as for old people, you know, the grown-ups, and they can touch their spiritual side that we cannot. They see us as not able to do so, but we can, but we do not find that much access to it. And I think that comes into play as how we see church and how we want to go
the
away
accessibility of religion then may prohibit millennials from practicing it.
Yeah.
But it's not as if you're necessarily not believing in God as much as you're not sufficiently entertained.
Yeah, it's mostly the structure, kind of.
Go for it. We'll go to you and then the practical theology major.
I was gonna say, I feel like I agree with her that it used to be church. I go to a mosque, but same concept. It was like, they just tell you, you do this and follow these guidelines, and the old generation would kind of just accept it. Okay, I'm told to do this, so I'm going to do that. But we feel like, especially with our access to more information with the internet and stuff, we want to understand and we want to be able to apply it to our lives, and the mosque environment or the church environment doesn't help us with the application to our daily lives. So we lose that connection with the church or the mosque because they're not speaking to us for our lives. They're speaking about, oh, just follow these guidelines and you'll be good. But how does that apply to me personally?
Yeah. Jen, have you given any thought to how religion may impact your work as a potential social worker? Or what are your thoughts about this?
I've actually been thinking about it a lot lately, just because sometimes your beliefs don't necessarily match up to what someone else's, a client that you may have. And it's a hard decision it's a hard decision between, do you kind of push in what your beliefs are and giving advice towards that client or person that you're working with, or do you find the balance between separation of your work and beliefs? But then it becomes a conflict, and as if your belief isn't it supposed to be an everyday thing, that everything that you do is supposed to surround what your beliefs are. So as a social work major and as a Christian, it's complicated, because sometimes you don't want to offend the person, or you don't want the person to feel like you're pushing your beliefs on them just because it's your beliefs.
Sure.
So it's a little hard.
It is complicated.
It's really
right?
complicated.
But something with Christianity in particular, and I think even with the classical religions of Judeo and Islam, we share common values. We share common principles that I think society as a whole sort of shares: compassion, empathy, altruism, you know, care for the dignity of the other. You know, but that's easily agreed upon. I guess where it does get more complicated is when you try to apply some of these principles that millennials are sort of resistant to. So I want to go to the practical theology major, because practical theology is really what this is, right?
And there's two big points to it, because the millennials now, I think we're a little bit more educated, and we're a little bit more sensitive to what's going on in the world. So I like to say these conservative Christian question mark people that are spewing hate, it really deters millennials away from religion, because media focuses on these bad Christian question mark people, that they apply this and project it on the actual good churches. And to piggyback off her point, it's really up to church leaders to diversify their liturgy. Like, I know the campus ministry at Barry, what we do is we say, who is in our church and how can we proclaim the word to them? Yeah. So we, by the music, by different even methods of proclaiming the word, we have to look at what our congregation is and then form our liturgy around that.
Interesting point. We had the Pope just this past week in speaking about, you know, Islamic terrorism. He says, I really can't speak about Islamic terrorism without speaking of Catholic violence, which was an interesting point to be made, right? To your point, in fact, I think, too. You had a thought.
Yeah, going off what he said earlier about millennials' interest in coexistence, I think religion is one thing that divides people, because there are certain doctrines within the Old Testament. Let's say homosexuals should die. So you can have your homosexual friends who are morally upstanding people, and in an environment that's more ripe for them to come out, so you know who these people are, and at the same time why does the Bible, what's wrong with him? Or apostasy, the punishment for leaving the religion. Like, your family members who leave the religion, why would they be deserving of death? I mean, they're perfectly upstanding moral people in our understanding of morality.
Right. You run the risk, though, I mean, I suppose if you impose sort of human standards onto the religion itself, it ceases to be real religion, right? It's sort of man-made rather than supposedly something revealed to man by God. Yeah. And I would imagine if God decided to reveal something to man, he's going to have certain guidelines that come along with it, right?
Yeah, it's like, even just piggyback off his point, about homosexuality. What we consider homosexuality today was never in the Bible. Was never, because it is a today's societal standard of what homosexuality is. That would never have been a relation to what was actually in biblical times.
Yeah. So am I incorrect in characterizing you all, at least, as believers, but not strictly speaking religious churchgoers? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to box you into yet another category.
You'd have to ask individually.
What's that?
I think you'd have to ask each of us.
Yeah, I know. But I was just getting a general sense that, I don't know, people are shaking their heads with a lot of things that we're saying here.
We compartmentalize in our brains different areas. So we have certain cognitive dissonance about certain things that we don't think are possible to be true, but there are also spiritual experiences or other areas of religion, like going to synagogue, the holidays, like those stuff are nice. So we're trying to keep both at the same time.
Absolutely.
I think you run a risk. I mean, as you could see just from these like brief discussion, it's so it's so much more complicated. So the fact that we're trying to say like, okay, millennials fit in this box and they're like kind of religious but not really, like we run a risk there because like, for example, I personally, I go to church, I'm a Christian. I guess you could say I'm more traditional in that sense. But I do face these struggles that you're talking about. Like, okay, how do I, like I still have gay friends, I still have, this is a huge part of my culture and it's something that I care about. Do I just throw it out the window because of what I perceive the Bible to be? So it's a challenge that we face, and in saying that, you know, we're talking about like influences and what influences us. And one thing that I feel that we risk as a generation is, as you were saying, so much of our influence comes from the media. So realistically, you know, Facebook has an algorithm. So when you're scrolling down your Facebook feed, you see things that are trending. And normally, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but it tends to be the same opinions or, you know, your friends who you closely follow. And even though we have all this access supposedly at a click away, realistically you don't, because at the end of the day, the most popular things are still showing up on your Facebook feed.
That only reaffirm your particular
exactly.
viewpoint.
And
right?
so it's
That's
tricky.
interesting. That's really interesting.
I mean, even just to give a millennials a peace of mind, like she said, well, I'm Christian, but I have gay friends and I don't know how to act. I can't really speak too much on the Judea side because it's not my specialty. But as long as you're living the two tenets of the New Testament, love God and love your neighbor as you would love yourself, if you're doing that, you're good.
Right. One last point on the religion. I've suggested before on Viewpoint, why don't we move to a post-religious society in which we're either all sort of privately religious, or indeed, have we reached a point in human history where we're too smart, really, to believe in God?
Well, that violates,
or organized religion.
I'd say that violates what the whole religion's about, because at least in Christianity, a huge component of it is community, right? Community.
You can have community without religion, though.
Well, I mean, then you're no longer believing in what it is you claim to believe.
Yeah.
We want
No, but that's the point, which will then, to your point, sort of break down the divide that religion causes. This is just an argument made by some. I don't know necessarily if I believe it, but
I mean, the best way to put it would be from my professor, Sister Gloria Schaub. Faith and religion, you can only think so far. This is where it's going to get you. But if you really want to be faithful, you have to let go. You have to let go of you can't intellectual God. He's too transcendent for us. You have to at least take that leap of faith to get to him. You can't just get it.
So let's get into some social and political issues that may or may not be influenced by your religious beliefs. And I'm interested to see the connection there, right? So who are you voting for? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Try and make the leap there between religion, religious beliefs, and contemporary social and political issues. Yeah.
Yeah, so currently we all know like the two main candidates, Hillary and Mr. Trump. So Donald Trump, to be precise, he says certain things that will be, like as a Christian, I am a Christian, and if he's encouraging violences and other things against other people, it doesn't really matter their background. So I don't think that goes with my personal beliefs. So if I will vote for Trump, that would mean to vote for racism. That would, to me, mean to vote for Semitism, to vote for vandalism, and I do not encourage those things, nor does my faith in Christianity. So I think that is a really high, like that has a high influence on whom I will be voting for.
It's interesting because politicians are freaking out about how to get the millennial vote. You know, the majority of whom sort of were seemingly wanting the anti-establishment candidate Bernie Sanders, but that's a moot point, right? Yeah. So it's interesting just to try and make the connection here. Yeah, go ahead.
Also, I think they very much inform each other, politics and religion. Like if you look at, let's say, Jews, the Orthodox Jews tend to be Republican to the right, and the more liberal you go, the more the group is liberal. And I think that has to go back to our earlier point, especially to millennials, is that the millennials who want coexistence, there are doctrines within the Old Testament that don't profess or sanction liberal values that we have today. So it makes it hard sometimes to look at some of the right-leaning candidates and say, okay, I'll vote for that guy, although he supports something that maybe the Old Testament says, but it's not my personal morality.
I mean, even looking at the theology of the invocations of the RNC and DNC, at the RNC, they had a very deep Southern conservative Baptist do it, and he stopped short of saying that Donald Trump was anointed by God to be president. Where on the other hand, at the DNC, you had a female African-American Episcopalian priest give this amazing invocation, and then at the very end of the first day, they had a female rabbi. And I think if you were going to try to shoot for the millennials, that's where it's at.
Yes.
I think.
You go ahead.
Sorry. I think they used to be able, politicians used to be able to just appeal to religion and say, I am a Christian, I am this, and most Christian would be like, okay, I'm going to vote for you. But it's kind of like the concept of coexist. I'm not, if I agree with some of your concepts, but you're being racist, I can't agree with you just because you endorse my religion or you seem to like represent my religion. So I think it's kind of like that.
Yeah, on the topic of coexisting, I think that us millennials, and I speak broadly on behalf of us, we are really progressive in terms of LGBTQ, on terms of race, and all kinds of aspects of what makes up our community and humanity in general. So for me in particular, when I see Donald Trump on TV talking about building walls and, you know, making people go back to their home countries, I think, well, if you want to make America great again, America's a melting pot. You know, it's a country where people of all sorts of religious backgrounds and ethnicities have been encouraged to kind of come together and form a nation. So that kind of, to me, as a millennial, if you want to claim it that, is a little hypocritical. So it makes me question the system, if you want to call it that. It makes me question all other beliefs, whether religious or, you know, political.
Sure.
There's something I kind of wanted to pose to the group, talking about like the evangelical right. You know, how when Donald Trump went to the conference and presented, and then they asked him, you know, do you ever apologize or ask for forgiveness from God? And he, you know, gave us like a weird answer. He couldn't really say yes, but he didn't say no either. And you know, these people are voting for him, you know, not as in Trump as they used to, you know, 20 years ago for the right wing. But I wanted to know what you guys thought about that. I mean, is this just something that, because I believe... Thought
about what exactly?
Like, why they do that. I think that, you know, their religion specifically, or their beliefs contradict what Donald Trump stands for, and that's my opinion. But I wanted to know what you guys thought about that and why they were supporting him.
It's mainly because it's not, just to speak bluntly, he even said when things, he likes the uneducated and he likes the conservative Christians. It's all about blind faith, and it's actually, it's a lot of people who take the Bible word for word for word. But this came down from
I don't mean to interrupt, but right, it's a fascinating point why Christian conservatives, at least evangelical ones, those on the right, are blindly voting for Trump when Trump seems to, at least on the face of it, so very much disagree with what they inherently believe, right?
Yeah, and these are great people, and, you know.
But finish that point, though.
It's almost blind faith going back and forth,
right.
Because he says he's for this, he's going to live by the Bible. That's what I do. Bam, you got to vote, and that's where he anchors his majority, where he wants his voters is Caucasian, middle-aged people that are in the conservative Christian Bible Belt.
Can you provide any balance or contextualization to this discussion, since we're coming down heavy on Trump? I'm trying to figure out.
Well, it's hard to ignore him, but I think one of the beauties of this country is the fact that it's, you know, the separation of church and state, right? So it's older, it's what's supposed to be, I believe. It's how do we separate church and state, yet we find so many people like, okay, well, I'm going to vote for him because, you know, I'm a Christian, I'm a conservative Christian, etc. And I understand to a certain extent, like, you know, when you have a faith, it does heavily influence your moral values and what you want to see in your country. And that's perfectly understandable. But what I also want to see for our generation, and also for, you know, those above us and those beneath us, and older and not above or beneath, but I mean like older and younger, is how do we find what is still morally relevant, but also gonna benefit our country as a whole. So it's just a challenge.
It's a very interesting tension that you're pointing out, and I think most of those on the right are fearful of government blurring the line between separations, church and state, ironically enough, with respect to the church's, or rather the state's, infringement upon religious liberty, which is a big issue. that somehow the government is going to prohibit the practice of Christians, Jews, and Muslims in the public square. If, for example, right, and I point to this all the time, the bakery owner does not want to bake that cake for the gay wedding. Why must the state be compelled to force them to do it when they religiously believe otherwise? So, to your point, not only do you want to sort of, I mean, you don't want to blur that line, but it seems that's why most Christian conservatives, at least on the right, are going with Trump. I don't know what my question is there, but some thoughts. No, none whatsoever.
I mean, it's a very blurry topic because you look at Texas and then you look at Pennsylvania that have one of the strongest religious freedoms. You get LGBTQ teachers that get fired from private schools just for being married.
The argument then is it's a license to discriminate.
Yeah, it's
right?
it's a license to discriminate. Yes.
So what are you hopeful for? We have about 30 seconds left. Anybody want to chime in with a final thought about what you're hopeful about? Sure.
I was just thinking, I want us to, like, the morals and values we agree on, I would like if we could work towards those because we all can coexist with that, like we said earlier. So if we could work towards that instead of concentrating on our differences, I think that would just be the best.
Yeah, excellent.
One last point, like going back on Trump, is one of the things that he does in his speeches and everything, he's trying to divide the people. But in my opinion, as a business leader, as he claims to be, is one of the things that people have found out is that your business works better when you have your workers working together. But if you're trying to divide the people, how are you going to put them to work well together and have boost the economy?
No, more to the point of unity. We're out of time, unfortunately, but really thank you so much for joining me for this special edition. You can all join us again more on Facebook and Twitter and social media. I'm Henry Mack. Thanks for watching.